Yes, more participants are coming. We'll wait for a couple more minutes. Welcome, everyone. People are still trickling in, and the numbers are growing, but let's get started. Welcome to this workshop on harnessing foresight processes for food systems transformation for agroecology. My name is Anne-Sophie Poiseau. I'm the lead of the FAO team that works on farmer field schools and participatory innovation. And I'm very happy to be moderating this workshop today, where we will share the work that we've been doing for a few years now on how can we harness foresight processes to support food systems transformation for agroecology. We're very happy to have our scientific partners at CIRAD with us today, as well as our funding partner, GIZ, and many of you who have contributed to this work, provided inputs, and participated in workshops that have shaped the recommendations that we will share with everyone today. So very happy to be introducing the workshop and giving the floor to Vincent Martin to give opening remarks. Vincent is the director of the FAO Office for Innovation and a strong advocate of foresight approaches. So Vincent, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Sophie, yes, strong advocate of foresight and agroecology. I've been very much promoting this agenda when I was in the field during the last 15 years in Africa and in Asia. And for me, it's two very important things that we bring together in this meeting. And I'm very glad to welcome all the participants to this important meeting. I'm very glad to see the participation of our colleagues from CIRAD and from GIZ. And so today we are here together to explore how we could transform our food systems through the power of agroecology and foresight. And as we were alluding to it, these are two innovative approaches, very different approaches, but two innovative approaches. First, with regard to agroecology, it has been recognized by several landmark reports that and agroecology has emerged as one of the innovative approaches to accelerate transition to more sustainable agri-food systems. And as you know, in each country now, we've got national pathways for food system transformation, which are a fantastic entry point for FAO, the United Nations and their partners to bring innovation, to bring new approaches that can really have an impact on transforming agri-food system for more resilient and sustainable and efficient agri-food systems. So agroecology definitely has become an area of focus for FAO, for our partners, and is recognized as an innovative approach. I wanted to say two words on foresight also, which has been recognized at the UN level as one of the quintet of change for a UN 2.0. What it means part of this reform of the United Nations has looked at what are the 5 most important levers that could really bring transformation at scale, and one of them was foresight. Some of these other 5 were digitalization, it was innovation, but it was also behavioral science. So you could see that foresight is really figuring very high in the agenda of the United Nations. And this is one of our key focus area in the Office of Innovation. We've put foresight as one of our key focus area. And actually, we've just finalized a foresight exercise on emerging technologies and innovation. And this report has just been released, and it should be on the internet like now, and is showing that part of the solutions to address these big challenges, which are climate change, urbanization, demography, and so on and so forth, some of the solutions and some of the recognized most transformative solutions are nature-based solutions, are frugal innovation, are agroecological practices. So it's quite interesting to see in this report that the solutions are not just technological, but they are also in the area of social innovation. And then I would like to, maybe deliver 3 more key messages on foresight. The first one is that through the power of visioning, foresight can unveil hidden realities, processes, actors, and parameters that are currently invisible in mainstream models, and it helps build comprehensive and creative visions of sustainable agricultural system by 2050, including through agroecology. And in doing so, foresight can help broaden the narrative and introduce novel visions of the future of our societies. The second kind of key message on foresight is that foresight can bolster evidence and harness the power of data to increase the understanding of the implication of agroecological futures in the eyes of policymakers. And third key message is that participatory foresight processes can create an evidence-based arena for cross-sectoral dialogue where risk and trade-offs can be addressed and creative discussions about the futures we aspire to unfold can occur. And this is exactly what happened when we did our foresight exercise. Generally speaking, on emerging technology and innovation, I think one of the most fascinating aspect of this exercise was the dialogue it created with all the stakeholders we involved in this exercise. And it created, one example was it created a very interesting dialogue with the private sector that we involved in our foresight exercise, and where we could open doors and start speaking the same language when we are talking about creating a future. So I think the power of this conversation that can be put forth by foresight exercises is extremely important. So now the question is where foresight meets agroecology. What is the intersection between the two? And what I understand when I was asked to open this workshop is that 2 years ago, FAO joined forces with CIRAD and GIZ to understand how agricultural foresight processes can properly consider integrated different types of approaches, such as agroecology, to expand the range of choices available when envisioning transformative food system pathways. And so this project, Foresight on Challenges and Opportunity for Sustainable Food System and Agroecological Transition, it focuses on rethinking foresight initiatives, embracing participatory approaches, and supporting the translation of visionary scenarios into actionable policy. So showing this very important link and articulation between foresight exercises which call for action and which are translated into actionable policies. So the guidance document that will be presented to you today was crafted to lead foresight practitioners and funders on the use of foresight processes for sustainable food transformation through agroecology. And it offers a framework for incorporating agroecology into foresight processes. It not only suggests adaptations for each phase, but also champion a more robust and scientifically rigorous approach to the development of sustainable food systems. So we are here today to share with you the main outcome of this initiative, following this extensive collaboration involving expertise from diverse fields, practitioners, and initiatives within the agroecology and foresight communities. So we also wish to explore with you concrete avenues to forge powerful collaborations between the experts in foresight and the agroecology practitioners to take this agenda forward. So this is why this workshop is so important for us and for all of you, I guess, and also for our policymakers. So before closing, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to GIZ. Their investment and trust have been pivotal, bringing together a global tapestry of research and implementation partners. This workshop is definitely a step in our quest for sustainable solutions. We must broaden our horizons, and we need to integrate a holistic view that encompasses health, environmental sustainability, socioeconomic stability, and multiple geographical scales. And then I would like also to give a very special thanks to our colleagues from CIRAD for their groundbreaking leadership, without which we couldn't have envisioned this work. So having said that, I would like really to thank you for inviting me, for giving this opening remark. I'm very excited to hear about your deliberation, recommendations, and I wish you an excellent workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vincent, and great to hear about this leadership that we have now in FAO in the Office of Innovation, both for the work on foresight and the work on agroecology. And I'd like to turn now to our friends and partners at GIZ and Ute Rickman to give opening remarks as well. Ute is the team leader for the program called Support of Agroecological Transformation Processes in India, SWATI. And she has a wealth of experience in international development in different regions of the world. And we are very glad to have partnered with Ute and her colleagues, Lisa, Wolfgang, Rajiv, and many others that we have at GIZ in making this work possible and opening new horizons for our scientific work and development work. So Ute, the floor is yours. Glad to see you here today. Your microphone is closed, Ute. We are not hearing you. The mic appears closed from your side. Okay, let's see if we can get that sorted. Maybe when Ute comes to us with and fixes the audio issue. I think she's back. Anyway, we're very happy to have partnered with.
Maybe we try to exist.
Oh, wonderful.
Does it work?
Ute, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Yes, thank you for your kind words, Anne-Sophie, and welcome to all of you, also from myself, GIZ, and especially the project I'm responsible for. The project is called Support to Agro-Ecological Transformation in India, with the abbreviation SWATI. Yes, and thank you for taking the time to attend our virtual workshop, Harnessing Foresight Processes for Food System Transformation through Agroecology. This morning, lunchtime, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are currently, I see a lot of attendants, participants here. So I really want to take this moment to share my appreciation for everyone lining up his or her schedule across time zones in a way that made it possible for you to attend this meeting. Yes, why do we need agroecology now? So first of all, as we all know, current agriculture and food systems create significant costs for the environment and health. This includes greenhouse gas emissions, soil degradations, water and air pollution, and loss of biological diversity. Also, there's a need for a fundamental transformation of agriculture and food systems. So agroecology is a strategy for a sustainable transformation. And for GIZ, agroecology is a dynamic and systemic approach that considers ecological, socio-cultural, technological, economic, and political dimensions of food production to consume and provides orientation for its development. Agroecology in German Development Cooperation has increased its commitment to promoting agroecological approaches at all levels since 2019 Bundestag resolution, achieving Sustainable Development Goals, recognizing and supporting potential from agroecology. Agroecology is now established as a priority in the BMZ core topic strategy transformation of agricultural and food systems. Also, joining the Agroecology coalition, BMZ, together with the German Federal Ministry of Agriculture in June 2023, underlined this commitment and will enable stronger dovetailing of bilateral and multilateral engagement. Food systems transformation through agroecology is a key priority of Indo-German cooperation. First, Indo-German Lighthouse, Agroecology and Sustainable Management of Natural Resources was agreed at the 6th Indo-German consultations on 2nd May 2022 as a part of Green and Sustainable Development Partnership. The objective was and is to support the transformation towards sustainable agriculture and food systems, taking a holistic and integrated view of a focus on rural and regional development, encompassing all dimensions of sustainable development. More than 15 technical and financial cooperation projects active in over 25 states in India. Strategic partnerships and dialogues with stakeholders from government, private sector, academia, and social and civil society. So one of these projects is SUATI. So what are we doing? Main objective is that agroecological transformation processes of agricultural and food systems are strengthened at national and state level in India. That means, what are we doing exactly? We support the strengthening knowledge exchange and application on agroecological practices in India. We support the implementation of agroecological programs with focus on crop and income diversification and market development. We anchor agroecological principles in Indian policies and programs. We support landscape-based implementation of agroecological approaches. So the project duration is quite long, so from 2021 to 2028, the budget of 18.5 million euro. Yes, dear ladies and gentlemen, this workshop is now a special and important one in a row of workshops and events that already happened before. For example, in FAO in Rome, in France, and in India. But why might this workshop be today so important and to whom? To name some. For researchers like those from CIRAD, foresight processes and agroecology are interesting and very useful fields for research. Thank you that you are here and for all your work you have done so far. For civil society organizations, results of foresight processes might support their work in order to support food system transformation through agroecology. Also, thank you very much to be here and for the work you have done. And for us as SUATI, as commissioner of this project to FAO, it's important as we want to support especially the agroecological transformation in India and foresight processes under consideration of agroecological aspects will be an approach supporting this. We already saw interesting results coming out of foresight studies for Andhra Pradesh that has been presented to the government of Andhra Pradesh this year, as well as to the central government of the Republic of India. This could be taken forward. As this foresight study has also been presented to representatives of 8 African countries on a study tour under the umbrella of the Lighthouse Agroecology and Sustainable Management of Natural Resources. Also these countries, also in these countries, the demand can increase. For FAO, foresight processes to support food system transformation through agroecology can even be taken to more countries worldwide, with effects for many farmers and their families, the private sector, representing traders, processors, etc., and consumers. As we are now at the stage to have already a draft guidance document on the use of foresight processes to support food system transformations through agroecology, we need all of your valuable inputs in our for our intensive discussion to come up with recommendations, agreements, and first ideas how to use this document in future in order to support food system transformations through agroecology based on excellent foresight processes all over the world. In this sense, I wish all of us a fruitful workshop.
Thank you so much, Ute, and again, thank you to GIZ for all the groundbreaking work that you're doing in so many countries, supporting transitions to agroecological approaches for sustainable food systems. And the Swati project that you lead in India is one of such examples. And thank you, of course, for supporting global work and thought pieces like the one that we're going to share today. So I will take you through quickly some of the workshop background and what we're going to do today. And in our workshop on harnessing foresight processes for food systems transformation through agroecology. So why did we start this work? We are all aware of the urgency of sustainable transformation of agri-food systems. That is at the forefront of the international agenda, and the urgency compounded by the climate emergency, the biodiversity crisis, and heightened food insecurity and security crisis in the world. And agroecology has emerged as a key part of the response that is discussed also in forums, including FAO, and I will come back to that in a minute. And agroecology is making let's say a lot of debate in our international fora, such as FAO, also because it is an approach that is transformative and that is very different and kind of radical compared to, let's say, incremental changes that has options for food systems. And when we started this work, what we noticed is that agroecology is not fully integrated in a lot of foresight initiatives that we have seen in the past years and recent decades about how we feed the world by 2050, whether it's foresight initiatives at global level, at regional, or with a national scope, or even a local scope. And yet, to support sustainable food systems, policymakers need a range of new options, including those that present uncertainties, those that we are not yet fully sure about. And that's why foresight is particularly helpful, because it helps us harness the power of vision, of imagination, to do the what ifs. And so it's very important that foresight scenarios can include options, transformative options like agroecology. And one of the reasons we've seen why foresight approaches many scenarios do not include really agroecological options is that they represent very complex systems, because typically agroecological approaches don't rely on monocultures on farm, but on polycropping. And so the yield of metrics, of yield per hectare is not a proper metric when you have many crops, trees, and animals on the same farm. But also agroecological options are context specifics, they are territory based, which makes it harder to model, and they span all elements of the food systems from production to consumption, which makes it also complex to model. And so We need to support practitioners of foresight and explore together how can we better integrate foresight in agroecological, how can we better integrate agroecological options in foresight scenarios so that we are providing our policymakers with enough options in our policy toolbox. Otherwise, can they really make transformative decisions if our scenarios present the usual options? Next. So this is how we started this work. And in fact, in the context of FAO, our member countries have debated the importance of getting more data, having more options, and understanding better the implications of agroecological transition so they can make decisions. In particular, through the Committee on World Food Security policy recommendations that you could see, this document you could see on the slide. Countries have asked us, governments have asked us to understand how we can strengthen the policy foundations for agroecological and other innovative approaches, how we can get better measurement and monitoring frameworks for agroecology that are adapted to agroecological options. What is the research and innovation we need, the training and education we need with co-creation of all knowledge of all actors in society, and how we can strengthen institutions to embrace more stakeholder engagement. Next. So these are some of the elements that was the starting point of our work. And we very much realize in this the power of collective future studies to help with this work. We were inspired by the work that was done with Agrimonde and Agribiome, by IRAE and CIRAD. And the French School of Perspective says, you know, in a way is inspired by the vision that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. At our levels, whether we are policymaker in civil society and international organizations in academia, a farmer, we participate to making the change that we want to see in the world. And foresight is helpful not just as a black box where scenarios are going to be presented to decision makers, but to be used as a learning machine, as a process that integrates a variety of scientific and stakeholder knowledge that participate together to build a public debate. And we here are inspired by the work of Bruno Dorin and Pierre-Benoît Joly on seeing foresight as an important process of democracy in the making, in a way. And foresight, as Vincent has mentioned, can really help unveil virtual realities, things that are not here yet, making the invisible more visible, to create comprehensive visions of these transitions. Next slide, so that we can have more options for the future. So this is how we created this project together with GIZ and CIRAD. And the key outputs are a guidance document on using foresight tools to support transition to sustainable food systems through agroecology, and 2 country pilots in Andhra Pradesh and Senegal, with a way to mobilize stakeholders, mobilize the foresight community, mobilize the agroecological community to strengthen this role that foresight can play in supporting our transitions to sustainable food systems through agroecology. Next. So we started back in December 2021, and we had a whole year last year and this year in building methodology and a corpus of different foresight exercises that we will hear about in a moment from Marie and Fatma. And we had a workshop that many of you attended last year in Rome in November, to confront perspectives and define lessons. And we have implemented also 2 foresight pilots in countries in India and Senegal. And we have our workshop this month of December to close the year. And early next year, the guidance document that we will discuss today will be published and released in collaboration with partner institutions. Next. So in India, one of the 2 pilot foresight exercises, this is what really started the work. It started actually before this project, with Bruno Dorin as a scientific lead from CIRAD and with the government of Andhra Pradesh in India. And the idea was a request from the government of this large state in India, which is about 55 million people, who the state is engaged in a strong program promoting natural farming, which is a form of agroecology. And they wanted help in clarifying what would happen if the entire state would transition to agroecology versus a continuation of the industrial agriculture scenario. And so they wanted to help in clarifying and quantifying two different visions of agriculture, and including a variety of types of knowledge, different groups of stakeholders, farmers, academics, policymakers, NGOs, activists, technical experts, and to unveil hidden realities and processes that could sustain the government in this transition program to agroecology. And we will be sharing in the chat some of the outcome of this work and the policy brief that has the beautiful visual that you see on your slide today. In Senegal, we had another pilot. If you can go to the next slide. We had another pilot that started more recently, about a little over a year ago, implemented jointly by FAO, CIRAD, ISRABAM, the DITAS, the Agro-Ecological movement of Senegal, and the government. And here we had three scenarios on agroecology, agro-industrial scenario, and a green coexistence scenario. And the results of these scenarios, you could see some elements. We don't have time to elaborate, but again, some of the documents will be shared on the chat. These results are already feeding ongoing policy processes and forming a base of evidence for dialogue across sectors. But we also had South-South cooperation with India and a visit of policymakers and stakeholders from civil society to India with us last October. Next. So the project has really helped us in bringing together actors, and as we've seen, foresight can bring different elements to sustainable food systems and benefits, supporting advocacy, help structure debates in an evidence-based way, support to assess public policies and empower actors, and also question the views of what is possible in the range of our food systems. It's important that we will notice and we hear about the diversity of foresight methodologies, quantitative models, as well as qualitative narratives that give detail and substance to the quantitative models, and both approaches are essential and should be articulated. Of course, we see that agroecological transformation are shaped by various interactions. It's adaptive through time, and we need more investments and adapted foresight processes to better and fully integrate diversified approach to advance more quickly through sustainable food systems. Next. So today, what will we do? The first objective is to give you an overview of what is in this guidance document on using foresight to support food system transformation through agroecology. And then we'll have a discussion session on why and how foresight could better include options of transition to sustainable food systems through agroecology. And we want to hear your views and contributions. And finally, we can explore also avenues for more collaborations between foresight and agroecology practitioners as well as policymakers. So we will now hear from Marie Delattre-Gasquet and Fatma Rostom at CIRAD about the conclusions of our guidance document. And we have several discussants who will be sharing their thoughts from different perspectives. We will then go into a plenary discussion about what is the content of this guidance document, any thoughts, and what would you add to it, but also what are the key implications for your work and for the work in the foresight and agroecology communities. Marie will summarize this main conclusions for us, and then we'll hear a few perspectives by Raoul Mille, the scientific counselor at the Permanent Mission of France to the UN in Rome. And we're very happy to have also closing remarks by Sylvain Perret, as the Director of Department of Environment and Societies at CIRAD. So thank you very much for joining. We hope you can bring your personal experience and enrich this discussion with your expertise, and also enrich the global guidance document that you should have received in the invitation. And we'd be happy if you may join a Foresight for Agroecology community of practices moving forward. So with that, I'd like to jump into the presentation by Marie Delargue-Gasquet and Fatma Rostom from CIRAD to share with you the conclusions of our guidance document. Marie has been leading this process. She's the former secretary of the CIRAD INRA Ethics Committee, and she was in charge with being the scientific lead for this work. She was also leading the Agri-Terrain exercise and has a wealth of experience in foresight. And Fatma is currently a researcher in the Dev unit of CIRAD from the Environment and Societies Department. And her work relates to sustainability and natural resources in the Anthropocene. And together they have spearheaded this work that they will present to you now. You can ask any clarifications in the Q&A chat box in the chat, and the experts can respond after their presentation. So Marie and Fatma, over to you. You have 25 minutes.
Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie.
Thank you. Can you see well the screen?
Perfect. Yes, thanks.
Yes.
So we will share, Fatma and I, the presentation, and it is really a pleasure for us to present the work that we've been doing over the last nearly 18 months, not full time, of course, but quite a lot. So this guidance, that's what we were asked to do, guidance on how to improve foresight processes to foster food system transformation through agroecology. So we will present first the key lessons from past processes, and then make recommendations. What is the objectives? Are the objectives of this guidance? We have two target groups. The first target group is the foresight community. The foresight community has been working on the futures of food system for quite a while, but as we will see, they don't really integrate so much agroecology in the future of food systems. They look at a lot of scenarios, but not necessarily and not really actively the integration of agroecology. And so we will try to show them through the analysis of our corpus and recommendations how this could be better done. The second target of our work is the agroecology community. The agroecology community has been working on agroecology and the practices for a long time, and the objective is to show why foresight is important to support sustainable food system transformation and through agroecology. We will show that foresight can be really useful also for the agroecology. All this is to try to improve and show that there are ways to transform what the future options and how we can improve that. So the precise objective of this workshop, we are bringing together these two communities. We will ask you later to which community you belong to. And your mission is, if you accept it, of course, is to discuss this guidance. We are proposing our analysis, we are proposing recommendations, and we will ask you at the end, do you agree with the proposed analysis and guidance? What are the key messages for you? What have you learned? What is missing? And second, how can you use all the work we've done? How can it help you to improve your work? And how can it help collaboration between the foresight and the agroecology community?
So, can you hear me well? Now we will discuss and agree rapidly on the concept that we used in this guidance. So we consider foresight as a participative and multidisciplinary approach that explores long-term futures and drivers of change. We think that it includes three attitudes, which are anticipation, to foresee the diversity of futures to where a system may go, the appropriation of this process by the inclusion of different actors, and all this is done to lead to action. And so future studies and the culture of anticipation, they're key to the transformation that we're talking about, because, you know, there is a manufacture of futures that is a set of political, social processes that select certain futures and neglect others. It's some kind of collective kitchen, let's say, where futures are selected and are alleged to be plausible, possible or not. And this is key for agroecology, that is seen as a potential solution to global challenges of the Anthropocene, like climate or social inequalities. That is an integrated approach based on ecological principles with social and economic dimensions. So we see that agroecology is at the same time a discipline, a set of practices, be them technical or social, and also a social movement, so a political movement. So it's a kind of cluster concept with very plural understandings of what agroecology is. And there were many attempts to unify this concept. We have taken these two examples, like the Gleesman's levels of agroecology that go from incremental change to transformational change, from very plot-based changes to global food system changes, and also the work by HLPE that determined 13 principles of agroecology that we will use later in the guidance. What is important also to catch is that we considered agroecology in a food system perspective. Here you have the FAO representation of the food system, where you can see like the core activities and actors from food, from production to consumption and disposing, but also the socioeconomic and environmental system where this agri-food system is embedded. And we see that you can find a correspondence between the drivers, triggers, and core activities of the food system with the agroecology principles. So to us, it's really crucial to have this system perspective in mind, because radical transformation entail risk, and that these risks should be held not only in the production activity, but in the whole system.
So in order to do the work, we traveled a long path. We started by identifying and analyzing 16 foresight processes, which had agroecology scenarios or related to agroecology. We had a seminar in Rome about a year ago, and then worked again on literature, made some presentation, got some feedback on the work, and wrote both a guidance document, which is a rather long document with all the analysis, and the guidance note, which is a shorter document. We're having this global workshop, and from all your reactions, and that's why your reactions are so important, we will finalize the document and the note, and they will be published. We got a corpus of 16 foresight processes, we took them at different scale: global scale, regional scale, farm scale, national scale, territorial scale. So all this is really a large foresight corpus, looking with scenarios with both agroecology or sustainable intensification and natural farming. We were not too fixed on the term agroecology, although during last year's workshop, we had some debates about it. What I would like to underline is what Anne-Sophie has already said, that 16 foresight processes with agroecology is not much. It means that there are a lot of other foresight processes that do not take into account agroecology, and that really go on either with ongoing trends or some breaks, but which are more negative, and there are not that many foresight processes. And most of these ones have been carried out because there were some donors behind who really wanted some special foresight to be done for agroecology. And the role of commissioners is very important in this foresight and pushing for the combination of foresight and agroecology. So our presentation will be structured around the 7 phases that are usually take place in a foresight process. We will go through them, and for each of them, we will present the key insights of the corpus and also the recommendations that we are making for better integration of agroecology during foresight for the transformation of food systems.
So let's start with the first phase, which is scoping the process. So why did people engaged in foresight with agroecology? Well, we identified 4 different aims that, of course, are not mutually exclusive. You have advocacy and mobilization. You have structuring debates. Some other are shedding light on political implications. And finally, others have an aim to empower and to co-create knowledge on agroecology. Now, how did people proceed? Well, at the end, we had mostly 3 types of methodologies. The first is narratives through visioning or morphological analysis, sometimes with drawings to make the narrative more vivid. You also had quantitative models that usually have quantified outputs, let's say. I will say more details afterwards. And also interactions between narratives and models. So we're coming to it. What were these foresight about, and what were the outcomes of the food system they were looking at? Well, most of them were looking at food security and nutrition outcomes, and mostly on the perspective of availability, not much on the access or the diversification of the food plate. Others also took into account socioeconomic outcomes, mostly on exports and imports, on employment and agricultural revenues, but not so much on more qualitative, let's say, outcomes like the level of trust in society or the size and capital structure of farms and companies. From the environmental perspective, a lot of these foresight processes looked at the land use and not so much on the water use, for example. From this, we drew a certain number of recommendations. First, that we should consider that transformation of food systems through agroecology are really political questions with financial implications, and that foresight for this can offer new political arenas at different geographical scale, because it's key to be able to discuss and co-construct these transformations. Third recommendation, that we need, as you said, Marie and Sophie, that more foresight, including agroecology, are needed, but that methodology should be adapted. So more foresight should be commission fund and with more participation. So this is why we advise to link up more foresight communities and agroecological communities, and also to be aware of using the anticipatory methods with rigor, so with rigorous approaches that exist in the literature, but also with what we call intellectual discipline that would allow to have imaginative and creative outcomes. The other set of recommendation is that participation and co-creation of knowledge is key, both for foresight and agroecology. So participation is really important in both, and it should start with a shared diagnosis of what the situation is and what the objectives are. And the objective must be really clear. It also needs to pay attention to the ethics of participation, deliberation, and to be sure that enough resources are mobilized. And then we have to consider the 5 levels of agroecology as presented in the introduction. We're talking about the Glisman's level. because what we said is that at the farm level, the change is only incremental, and that transformational change begins at the landscape level. Another key message, but also a methodological challenge, is to think about the interactions between scales. It's also important to include policymakers, because responsible governance is a principle of agroecology, but also to involve participants from all levels. And finally, it's important to consider the radicality of social change and the speed, may it be slow or rapid, of social and technical innovation and their dissemination and adoption.
The second phase that usually takes place in the foresight is mapping the system. System is a very important word, both for foresight and agroecology. And the previous speakers really talked about the fact that agroecology are complex system, and therefore the representation of the system is very important. And here we just tried to illustrate in our corpus how the different systems were represented. And of course, there are many other ways, but each one has a special way of representing the system. From that, we made some recommendations about this mapping. The use of systemic thinking is really important throughout the process. It will be important at the beginning so that people understand what are the linkages between the drivers, the causal relationships, the connections, the uncertainties, the risk factors. This is really important in the systemic representation. And it is very important also at the end when it comes to options for actions, because of the systemic thinking, one lever will have an influence on another driver. Levels, I mean, it's not, if you do this, it will have real impact on others. So really having this systematic approach is very important.
So the next phase is to identify the drivers of the system. We have looked at what were the most considered drivers in the foresight with agroecology of the corpus. And you can see that, and it echoes also the questions tackled. We see that it's a lot about the production activity in the agri-food system of crops and livestock, the use of inputs, and also the diets, but it never goes between both. For the socioeconomic system, the drivers are demography, geopolitical context, economic organization, and trade. And in the environmental system, it's mostly about energy, resources, and climate. And so you see that there are drivers that are kind of neglected. Like I said, the core activities that are between production and consumption in the supply chain, but also recycling, and the other uses of biomass, which is also not really discussed, is the land and natural resource governance, even if it's a real key principle in agroecology. Social values, what is the place of R&D and training, the place of big data also, and the financing system, as well in the environmental system, the water use, but also forests and oceans. And what we were wondering was maybe that the agroecology principles are not really tailored for foresight. They were not absolutely not done for it. You can see that some of the principles are variables, drivers, that don't have that we don't put any assumption on them. And some other principles are already assumptions, like recycling. It's an assumption on how we use wastes. And input reduction is also already an assumption of how to use inputs. So we think that during foresight processes, the agroecology principles should be used, but they should be adapted to foresight. So what are the recommendations? In addition to base assumption on the principles of agroecology, we recommend to look at the blind spots and to have creativity to imagine future disruptions, because agroecology, the futures with agroecology may be radically different from now. To work in the transdisciplinary manner with different actors in order to have different cultural and political opinions to be expressed, not to be afraid of the radicality of the future, to recognize also that all drivers cannot be measured and not to be taken into the monopoly of metrics. And so qualitative analysis are really important, but also to develop new metrics and to develop also the existing data that are a bit lacking.
The fourth phase is about building scenarios. So we saw that in our corpus, some foresight processes had only one scenario for agroecology, and they really developed that one very thoroughly. Others foresight processes have two scenarios. One scenario is kind of a business as usual, and another one is an agroecology or natural farming, as in India. The objective there is really to contrast very strongly two scenarios. But other foresight processes, like in our case, UNISECO and Agrimonterra, develop several scenarios which include agroecology assumptions. And that has another objective. It kind of opens up the future with agroecology. There's not only one future with agroecology in these cases, but there are several futures with agroecology. So the second thing we saw in the building of scenarios are that some foresight processes really develop narratives, but the other foresights in others, there's a real articulation between narratives and models. Like here in the case of UNISECO, there are storylines which are well written, and then there is also the results of modeling. And what is important is that in the results of modeling, it's not really the result of one scenario which is important, but they compare the result of the several scenarios and the impact, for example, here on cropland, grazing land, vegetation, and regrowth. That is done also in other foresight processes. So our recommendations for building scenarios are the following. It's really to enlarge the possible future of food system to agroecology and develop several scenarios with agroecology principles. It will be very difficult to take into account into one scenario. It will be even impossible. All the principles of agroecology. Some scenarios will probably stress more some agroecology principles, and other scenarios will stress more other agroecological principles. And that's already a lot, because it will open people's doors or windows, whatever you want to say. The second thing is to combine as much as possible narratives and modeling, because that helps creating powerful and imaginative representation. Narratives should be as appealing as possible, and they should call to emotions. They should be concrete, because when people hear the future with agroecology, it doesn't mean anything to most people if you don't really write a nice story behind that. So really calling to emotions with agroecology is really important, and showing how it changes the world. And also quantitative models is important, because if most citizens like appealing stories, a lot of decision makers, especially policy makers, look for quantitative and data. So the combination of the two is very important. And we really, with the quantitative data, it is important to compare one scenario with the other one, and not just say agroecology will give you that result, because we put data in. If the data is bad, garbage in is equals to garbage out. So really being develop models, but being very transparent about them. I've already told a little bit about the phase 5.
Yes, thank you. So the next phase is about drawing the lessons, and actually what we can see in these corpus, that of course we have some kind of selection bias because we chose foresight that dealt with agroecology, is that in these corpus, the business as usual scenario is not an option, that it doesn't answer to major challenges, like climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequalities, etc. But that agroecology is an interesting alternative. Most of the foresight show that agroecology could ensure food and nutrition security, and that it has positive impacts on the environment, on the socioeconomic context, on territorial balance, etc. So I don't go into details because it would take a lot of time, but you will have all the details in the guidance document, of course. The fact is, it's not because agroecology does provide a lot of positive impacts that it does solve all problems. And the transformation of food system through agroecology would also lead to trade-off. It would have winners and losers. The trade-offs will be about mostly the land use and how to do with also to couple with the energy transition, for example. And this will necessarily lead to social and political tension in the context of imbalance of power. And so this needs to be debated and discussed, of course. So for the lessons, what we recommend is to understanding that using the model is not magical, that we need clear representation of the strength and limitation of the model that we use. But at the same time, drawing the lessons from each scenario, but also, as you said, Mary, from their comparison, that it can help in precising and giving a coherence and enlarging the understanding of agroecology, because it gives some kind of colors of the state in the state of future of the food systems. We also recommend to provide trajectories and pathways, because most of the time in the foresight processes, you have some kind of final state, ideal final state, or not ideal at all, but you rarely have the trajectories to reach it. So we recommend to provide this kind of information as well.
Sorry, Marie and Fatma, you have 5 minutes, please.
Yeah. 6 phases to explore the system changes and highlight options for actions. That's very important because all foresights do not go up to that phase. They often sometimes provide scenarios, but don't go to options for actions. Next, please. So we saw that some foresight provide more general options for actions, lessons on land use, options for policies, or have conferences, which are often open to academia. They're not necessarily open to all citizens. And some others are really like here, Solagro, they really make an effort to provide options for actions that are really precise and go on. They've been continuing their work for some years, trying to go into more precise options. Most of the options for action that we have found relate to diets. Lots of changes in diets are proposed, to some changes in agricultural practices, some changes in the use of input, social rights, financial support, and trade regulation mostly. What our recommendations is that really these foresights often show that there's an urgent situation, and when it is urgent, it's really too late. So really, we should go forward and go into action very quickly. Second, that they help identifying no regret objectives. It's important to identify throughout all the scenario what is really most important, and that in any case, there will be no regret. I used the word leverages earlier because it is important, because of the systemic approach, to identify the leverages which will have the most impact, and not, whereas a lot of actions often focus on small details instead of looking at what are the leverages which will have the greater impact. And there's never one size for all solution. And the one thing which is complicated with agroecology is that agroecology is really important. It has an impact at local territorial level, and it is not the same thing, not the same solutions which will be useful, or at national, regional, and even, of course, even more at global level. So the linkages between the scale is very important. Fatma, at what?
It's you, Marie.
That's me. The last phase is really communicating and debating to generate changes. It is not so much to communicate, but really to generate changes. What we see is that there's a growing diversity in the foresight processes on how they disseminate and create changes. So some have videos, a lot of them organize debates. Some of them it's debates at academia level, but others have done also serious games. And so that's a great diversity in that dissemination. Our recommendations is that really we shouldn't let communication right at the end of the foresight process, but there should be communication throughout the foresight process, because it is throughout the foresight process that the debates will take place and that changes will take place. We should also target different arenas, have different targets for the audiences, and we should diversify the media and really try to look and go and work with citizens, because that's important, that's where changes also take place.
So,
2 minutes.
conclusion.
Marie and Fatma, please.
Yes, this is the conclusion. Don't worry. So to wrap it up, what are the key messages? Well, that with foresight processes with agroecology would help to collectively design agroecological futures. We saw that there are not enough foresight with agroecology, and that we need to have more participation, also to have this design collective. And by design, we also mean drawing, and to have this common understanding and coherence on what agroecology is. The second lesson is that foresight with agroecology can allow to explore the diversity of agroecological future. Agroecology is not monolithic. You have a diversity of pathways. When you take the food system or the 5 levels of agroecology, you can imagine a lot of ways of combining all these state of the future. So we really recommend to explore this diversity. Third, foresight process help to question the feasibility of agroecological futures, because foresight also has a role in assessing. That's with the help of quantitative models also, and that there are methodological improvements to be done. And foresight can also help to pin up the trade-offs that agroecology entails. And so since there are trade-offs, there is a debate that is crucial. And foresight offer political arenas to debate these futures and trajectories. And it's important to debate also in order to transform imagination, and that to contribute to this manufacture of futures that we have talked about in the introduction, by inspiring stories and appropriate metrics. And so the idea is to repoliticize the future in order to achieve this transformation that we're talking about, and to better build trust between society and science. Thank you very much. And this is your turn now. So please feel free to say what you think about the guidance document. What are the things that are missing, or if there are lacks or anything. This workshop is made for this, and also to understand what could be the implications of these recommendations for you in your work. Thank you.
What a wealth of insights. Thank you so much, Marie and Fatma. Wonderful to see all of the conclusions of our work summarized. And we already have a very active chat with many colleagues posting questions, but also sharing their own experiences, their own foresight and agroecological projects. So many links for everyone to check up in the chat, but also an active Q&A section that I'm inviting also Marie and Fatma to go and check, and so you can answer the questions directly in the Q&A section, Fatma and Marie. So to kickstart our discussion, we are inviting a few of you to provide some of your thoughts on this work before we open up the floor to everyone for sharing contributions. And we have a few panelists. Each of you will have about 6 minutes. I'm inviting first Oliver Oliveros to share thoughts on this work and its implications. Oliver is the coordinator of the Agroecology Coalition, a very important coalition and very active. And before this, he was the interim executive director of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, which is a coalition of foundations who are very influential in leveraging resources to help shape food systems to more sustainability, security, and equity. And Oliver also served as the UN Food Systems Summit Secretariat for the Champions Network Engagement. Oliver, the floor is yours. A very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Can you hear me all? Fantastic. And thanks to Marie and Fatma for the very wonderful presentation, very rich, which is really, really timely and relevant. I mean, as you all know, agroecology has been gaining momentum in the past decades. And we should also recognize that while it's gaining momentum, it's also gone a long way. Back in the 90s, agroecology is seen not just an alternative, but as a Brazilian friend would say, it was beyond alternative. It was a stuff that, you know, we were not, these are the stuff that are not necessarily taught in school, with a very, very few authors or references to cite, but we now see it really happening on the ground. We could also see an increased and enhanced awareness on food systems agenda and the need to transform our current food systems, thanks partly also to the Food System Summit process, which helped amplify that, and the various policy conversations that are happening now. So the landscape is lending itself for a better uptake of tools like foresight process in imagining or visioning or in reinventing or inventing the future that we want to see. And the document is really very comprehensive. It is also realistic, but it also is very honest in terms of what it is not able to do, what are the blind spots, but also what needs to be addressed. So for me, it's really a very important entry point, a tool to, number one, gather and collect more evidence for agroecology, which we can use to feed into various efforts, like what we do in the coalition for advocating for increased investments in agroecology. We all know now that while agroecology is gaining momentum, the level of funding that is going to agroecology is not commensurate to the level of recognition that it deserves or the level of potential that we all say it has. And we could also use that same set of evidence in making more or advocating for more political support and political engagement, or repoliticizing, as you mentioned in your closing slide there, around agroecology. So all these things are really, really important. Now, going back to the foresight study, I've just jotted down a few points, 3 points each, in terms of what the additional elements or issues that probably need to be considered. One of the things that I've noted down here is really about simplicity. The topic is very complex. The foresight is also very complex in terms of exercise. So if you really want to have a buy-in of people from grassroots stakeholders to decision makers, even to business sectors, we may probably have to look into how we could simplify not the narrative itself, but the process and the outcomes that come out of this exercise. As what a Romanian sculptor and painter said, Brancusi, simplicity is complexity resolved. So maybe that is something that we could also explore, how we could make it simpler and accessible. Sometimes it comes across as highly theoretical, and it probably turns off the stakeholders that we want this tool adopt. Right, that's one. The second part you've mentioned about metrics as well, and I think it's really important to also capture the process-related metrics that that has to be captured and amplified in terms of performance. It's not just about production and economic performance, but the process from the agroecological perspective, because we know that it is not just a science or a practice, it is also a social movement. So how are we able to capture the social dynamics, the uptake, the mobilization, the trust and confidence building that is needed for us to take up and promote an agroecological future? Which leads me to my third point around equity. I don't think I've heard the word equity in the presentation or in the future of agroecology that we wanted to see, because I think that is in the core of agroecology. One of the lock-ins that we have, that is the concentration of power. And I think in that equity is really, really important. So if we want to address transformation and not just change, I think we need to talk about inequities in terms of access to knowledge, in terms of tools, technologies, resources, inequities in terms of wealth, and therefore poverty. Right. So those are the 3 points that I wanted to mention that probably may want to reconsider as well. Maybe 2 additional points there is in terms of how can we further promote the uptake of this process in terms of this tool. I'm thinking, how can we embed foresight aspects in terms of development planning process? So it touches not only on agriculture and environment sectors when we talk with governments, but also those in the social development, trade, and economic policies. So it becomes a really sort of like in the front and center of development planning process, not just including budget and financing, right? And then maybe one last point is around capacity building and training. What simple tools can are there some tools, methodologies, or a guide that can be used and taken up and used by our target, particularly within the agroecology community, to be able to make sure that they're able to take it up in terms of designing, envisioning the future they want to see at their respective scale. So let me stop there and turn over the floor to you, Anne-Sophie, and to other colleagues. Over.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and really heed the call for simplicity. How do we communicate simply the complexity? That's one of the very brilliant points that you just made. I'll turn quickly to Dr. Monika Zurek. Welcome, Monika. Monika is a titular associate professor and a senior researcher at the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford. And she's involved and leads a number of projects within the food systems group at the ECI, including co-leading the Foresight for Food initiative, which is very important and influential in the field of foresight, and to advise policymakers. And she also sits on the coordination team of the UK's Global Food Security Programme on the resilience of the UK food system. Monika, the floor is yours. 5 minutes, please, in the interest of time. A warm welcome. Your microphone is on.
I think I'm muted. Okay, thanks very much, and thank you very much to the presenters, and congratulations to the authors of this very complex study. I'm just amazed about the kind of information that you amassed and also the analysis that you brought together. So yes, really amazing to see all of that, and a very rich report to dive into. Before I start, I just wanted to say 2 words about what Foresight for Food as an initiative does, because I think it can really help with a lot of the issues that came up also from my previous presenter, and also that Marie and Fatma touched upon in their work. The Foresight for Food initiative really tries to bring together basically foresight practitioners and users to really think about how can we enhance the use of foresight and scenario analysis to support food system transformation. So exactly the topic that you're also interested in. And it came together basically as a set of people, and Marie and CIRAD and her colleagues are part of that, really to provide a network for people to talk about foresight and scenario analysis, build a community of practice, do capacity building to different communities. So I hope that the agroecological community might be interested in reaching out to us here as a way to bridge the gap between foresight work and agroecology work, and also to work really deeply on the methods around using foresight, broker, so to say, different connections between communities in the foresight space, but also towards the users. And so in that, I'm really glad that you know, a report that Marie and Fatma put together are coming out, because I think it touches on a lot of the needs that we have, that we are seeing in the foresight community, to help us kind of you know, innovate and take new routes. Thinking about basically where the foresight work could best be used in order to help with food system transformation. So based on these, let me just offer a couple of observations on the report, because actually from being a foresight practitioner myself, I see, so to say, a lot of kind of recommendations coming out that quite a number of us have been thinking about for a while. I mean, I think the report really well highlights how foresight as a tool, particular scenario planning, but also other foresight tools can help in kind of bringing together practitioners in a very complex space. I think that's very clear, that the whole idea of food system transformation and also of bringing in agroecological approaches for that is actually a very complex setting. And as much as we hope to simplify, and I totally hear Olivier's call for making this all simpler, I think that foresight can play a role in this, but only if it's very well managed. And I think that also comes out from what Fatma and Marie are saying. So there are a lot of useful tools that can be brought to this, but they need to be brought to it with rigor and with, as Marie and Fatma were saying, intellectual rigor also, in order to make sure that we are using the right set of tools. I think what the report clearly also points towards is that on the side of the foresight community, there's a lot of innovations that can and should happen in order to support the type of work that the agroecological community is doing. For example, thinking very carefully about who sits around the table when these futures are discussed, I think is really important. And I think, and therefore, you know, thinking about participation in these processes, who has the power to participate and how, I think is something that the foresight community has thought about, but can definitely think more about, because I think that's maybe one reason why we are seeing so few agroecological scenarios actually, or incorporating agroecological thinking, is because, you know, who has built the scenarios? And that brings me to another point, is innovation around modeling of different futures. You know, what I know from my own experience is that you know, modeling some of these very complex agroecological principles is not something that's done easy. But this is where we need more input, where we need more funding, as Marie and Fatma are also saying, in order to advance the type of modeling approaches that are possible in the field, in order to better take up some or better represent some of the complexities and actually bring out some of the pros and cons of agroecologic approaches, and being able to also substantiate that by evidence, by numbers, by potential models. You know, so I think that's a very important point. Last but not least, I nevertheless wanted to also say that I think the report also stresses very much of how important the qualitative side of scenario planning is and scenario building. And I'm qualitative scenario person, where I always found, so to say, the power of these approaches of bringing people from very different perspectives and walks of lives together in more of a safe space that foresight processes can provide, to discuss some really hard questions without necessarily doing this within a political setting, but doing this in the safe space of a foresight process can become really important. And here, one question that I have is kind of the role of neutral brokers that these foresight processes can play, as another innovative space that we might need much more in the food systems community to really think about a way forward. So these are just some of the remarks that I wanted to offer. Maybe one very last point is that it might be very useful to separate the messages for the different communities out a little bit, so that there is something that the foresight community can kind of debate and think about, and something that the agroecological community can talk about. In the moment, the messages are all a bit mixed, and it's a bit hard to separate out, okay, what do I as a foresight person now need to do different? So that would be my last offer, just in terms of just digesting the richness of this report and the analysis, which is really amazing. I hope this can help to kind of bring the different communities, foresight and agroecologic community, so to say, give them a little bit of homework by just pulling some of the different learnings out in a way that they can be easy digested by the community. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to further work in that space. Definitely in my own work, we'll take more agroecological thinking on board when we start working in our next set of projects. Thank you.
Wonderful, Monica. Thank you so much, and great to hear that this was helpful also in your work. And Foresight for Food is definitely a hugely influential initiative and partnership in this space. So we really look forward also to maybe partnering with you and having follow-on conversations on how we can take this works to the next level. Wonderful. So I now turn to Bruno Dorin, our own friend and colleague from CIRAD, with whom this whole work actually started thanks to the foresight exercise that the two of us started together in India about 5 years ago. Almost. And Bruno is a senior researcher at CIRAD as an economist, and he has 17 plus years of research experience in France, and almost as many years in India. And he works at the nexus of agriculture, nutrition, employment, poverty, and ecology. And it is Bruno who developed the Agro-Biome model for enabling collective foresight for sustainable food systems. So Bruno, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sophie, can you hear me properly?
Yes, we hear you well.
Thank you. So dear colleague, everyone, in my 5 minutes discussion, I would like first to congratulate Marie, Fatma, and Théophane for the guidance notes on foresight processes for food system transformation through agroecology. A note which managed in a very well-written form to gather, organize, and synthesize the many elements and lessons we could draw from 16 foresight processes and from international seminar we had in FAO Rome on 7-8 November 22. In this note, it is several times highlighted how important was the introduction and development of new metrics for food system transformation through agroecology. And I will try now to illustrate and discuss this issue with our Agro-Eco 2050 foresight exercise in India and the Agri-Biome numeric tool which guided the reflections, debates, and assumptions for our panel of experts, gathering academics from different fields, but also farmers' representatives, policymakers, or NGO. Before jumping, let's review, it does not work. Sorry, next slide. I don't know how to move it. It's always a problem with Zoom. Yes. Before jumping in this foresight adventure, one of my first research questions was how can we make local agroecological advocacy movement an experiment like a community managed natural farming in Andhra Pradesh more visible and credible in states, national and international scenario, especially when current science and model are shaped and designed for the industrial socio-technical regime. In the economic sphere, for example, it is obvious both theoretically and factually, and that in agriculture or other sector, that it is the enlargement of farm size and the capital concentration that drives profits through the substitution of labor by machineries and economy of scale with specialization. But as shown in my own works, enlarging farm size did not happen in most developing countries and cannot be a major future driver for increasing farmer income due to many reasons and evidence that I detail elsewhere. Including farm size in the, so including farm size in the reasoning is therefore important, and in Agribiome, I proxy and include it in various computation with the availability of cropland per farmer. It is also obvious theoretically and factually that conventional model works towards what Peter Timmer called a world without agriculture, meaning a world where agriculture represents less than 3% of GDP and less than 3% of employment, as today in all OECD countries. This is quite far from agroecological vision and principle, where we rather envision many but wealthy small farmers cultivating and harvesting nature with many environmental and health services. In Agribiome, to account for this very different vision of development, I introduced two new metrics. Firstly, the total level of work of employment that a society is able to provide to its people. And secondly, the labor income gap between farmer and non-farmer to account for agricultural poverty and agrarian crisis as happened in India. Lastly, and using the new matrix described earlier, I delimited not but one possible path of what we call in economic structural transformation of modern economic growth, and which are computed for the past decade, but also for 2050 future scenario. In mainstream modern agriculture, technology is also very uniform, with few monoculture maximizing yields, with industrial and costly technological recipes such as irrigation, fertilizer, pesticide, genomics, big machinery, and now artificial intelligence. How can we represent agroecology in such a framework where land productivity is rather based on highly diversified system, maximizing overall productivity with dense polycropping and local technology inputs? To avoid this bias, in Agribiome, I suggest to estimate and use of overall annual land productivity in edible biomass, and I proxy it with the total calorie produced per hectare in a year, or when divided by 365 in a day. So what did we manage to show with this new metrics and the many foresight workshops we had with our Indian expert group? Very briefly, in our agroecological scenario for Andhra Pradesh in 2050, compared to a scenario of intensified industrial agriculture and food, we cultivate and regenerate 365 days a year, plus 2.8 million hectares of land left fallow by industrial agriculture. We produce plus 1,000 kilocalories per day and per inhabitant of much healthier and more balanced food. Plus, agroecological farmer earn as much as industrial farmer with zero fertilizer, zero pesticide, and significant saving in water and fossil energy. We also employed more than 5 million farmers, and employment drops from 30% to 7%. We reduce from 37 to 22% the farmer income gap with non-farmer. And the growth rate of the economy increased from 6.5% per year. And overall, we are greening the economy and save billions in public subsidy. We also show that the cost of policy to reduce inequality would be much less in the agroecological scenario than the industrial scenario, but I have no time to present you this. Overall, it was a learning journey for all, with knowledge sharing and debates amongst many stakeholders, with only two but contrasting macro scenarios. In order to change the rule of the game, of the system in Andhra Pradesh and hopefully in India and elsewhere, in favor of small-scale agroecological farming. Thank you for your attention.
Wonderful, Bruno. Thank you for sharing the outcome of this work that we have been conducting together in the past few years with the government of Andhra Pradesh, in which we presented to the government of the state and the government of India last October, and which generated a lot of interest. So thank you so much to Monica and Oliver and Bruno for sharing thoughts. And now we'll open up the space for comments and discussion. Before we jump into your comments, and while my colleagues are setting up a whiteboard on which we will capture everybody's comments and questions, we want to run a small poll to share who's around the room. So I'll hand over to my colleagues to set up the poll. What is your main area of professional interest at the moment? Just so that we understand a little bit where you come from and which space you are normally working on. We have a lot of agroecology practitioners among us, over 50% of people in the room, about 12% foresight experts or practitioners, but a lot of people also interested in working on both approaches, about a third of the group so far. Okay, so meanwhile, so we have a picture that is painted of who is here in the room, and very interesting to see. I was expecting actually more foresight practitioners than agroecology practitioners, so that's quite interesting to see that there's a lot of people in the agroecology space who are interested by this work on foresight, and indeed I think it is very relevant to the science and the practice of agroecology. Okay, thank you so much. So we'd like now to open the floor for comments and questions from everyone. So there are three ways you can participate: continue chatting and posting in the chat or in the Q&A section, but also you can connect at this link that you see in the chat. It's a board called Miro, where you can set up your paste your comments and your contributions. So the questions that we invite you to share, keep sharing your thoughts on, you know, what are your suggestions about this work and about these recommendations? Do you agree with them? And what are the key implications for your work and for the work that you've seen on agroecology and foresight? My colleagues, Jimena and Zoe, have been very busy posting some of your comments into the chat already, and you can click to you click on the link that is in the chat box. You may be required to register and enter your email, and you pick up a post-it note on the left in the color that you want, then you can start inserting your contributions in the chat. I see a lot of you are already connected and posting a lot of comments, but I'm also inviting any of you who wants to share a question to take up the microphone. Do we have any questions or comments? Anybody who wants to take the floor? You can raise your hand or just open your mic to speak. Do you agree with the proposed guidance that was shared by Fatma and Marie? What else could be done in this report? What are the implications for your work? Ashish Guptaji is joining us from India. Ashish, the floor is yours. Maybe the speakers can introduce themselves when they start speaking. Ashish, over to you.
All right, thank you, Anne-Sophie. It's great to see all friends again. My name is Ashish. People know me as Gupta ji. I was also fortunate to be part of the expert committee for the foresight studies in India. We had a lot of deliberation over the past 3 years. And there was this one question that I used to pose, and Bruno and I used to have a lot of discussions about this. I will bring that same question here. So the foresight study is very broad-based. As we can see, it encompasses all aspects of sustainability, ecological, economic, and social. An important part of the socio-economic part of the methodology is the markets. Now, history tells us that markets have been primary drivers for change in agricultural system over the last 4 or 5 decades across the world. The methodology is one part of the foresight, and the data is another part of the foresight. And now, as part of sustainable food systems transformation, we talk about localized market initiatives. One of the challenges we had with foresight studies in India is there was very little data available on local markets. So my recommendation is that the methodology is good. It's a question of how do we get cross-sectoral data into the foresight modeling and make it a power statement, not just for transformation of the production systems, but also of the food systems by and large. So that is my question and recommendation on how to make it broad-based to include many aspects of trade, especially localized trade at regional, state, and national level, and make it more broad-based. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Very relevant question. And we may actually enlarge it, what do we do when we have little data about a particular aspect? You're talking in this case specifically about data on local food systems, local trade, but there are also data gaps in other areas. And maybe Fatma and Marie will want to share with us how do we respond to these data gaps. We'll take a few more questions. I see Sheila's hand is up. Sheila? You can also introduce.
Infinite thanks for this opportunity. My question is, if you are planning to engage in the 7th cycle of the IPCC assessment, because there is a chasm between some narratives in the last report, 2022 report, between the narrative and the integrated models that quantify those narratives. So there was like from the Center of Innovation in Paris, there were researchers saying that we need more diverse visions inside the IPCC, how they build those scenarios, and now the cycle is beginning. So I'm interested in that. So infinite thanks for your work, and it's a great honor to be able to be part of this.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Very interesting question about how this work may feed into the IPCC assessment 7th cycle. I don't see other hands up. I wonder if other colleagues want to take the floor and share thoughts or their comments. You could see lots of comments are being built into the Miro board. Anybody else for the floor? I saw a lot of comments and chats being made.
Uno Sveling is asking for the floor.
Sure.
Thank you. It has been a very interesting afternoon, I must say. The issue that was hanging was the relationship between the future studies on the one side and the policy type of implications. And those are sort of not cut in that there is sort of one outflow of the studies, because it has been to be packaged in various ways, depending on who the receiver are, at which level you are, in which sector, etc., etc. And it was indicated in the presentations, and rightly so, that this is a tricky field, how to make that connection. But are there some more types of, you could say, secondary thought about this tricky question? Thank you. And thank you for the initiative to have this Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Uno. I see that a lot of contributions are being posted on the Miro board. Let me remind that you can click on the link that we provided in the chat if you want to add some of your posted questions. And in a few minutes, Marie will summarize the inputs that we see. I'd like to give the floor to Ahmed Moran for your comment or contribution, Ahmed.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We hear you well, yes.
Yes. Thanks for the very nice presentation. Actually, I want to know there is a strong narrative of growing more foods at any cost, like using more pesticide, more fertilizer. So this is a very strong narrative. It is roaming around every part of the world. So in that particular case, can you give us the data, the number of area is actually covered or the land in agroecological field? We should consider it as an agroecological field.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. And I may take a few more questions or comments before we give back the floor to Marie to pick up some of the questions. And some of your questions can also be posted in the Q&A section next to the chat, on the left of the chat, so that you can get answers also from the speakers in writing. I don't see another hand up. I wonder if we have, maybe I can take one more comment before giving the floor back to Marie. If not, I will hand back the floor to you, Marie, to summarize a few of the contributions that we are seeing on the board and in the chat and Q&A section. Marie, over to you.
Thank you very much. I see Guy wants to say a word. Shall we let him talk?
I didn't see your hand, Guy. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a very late end, but my question is related to some guidance for policymakers, how to interact with policymakers to be sure that there is a kind of buy-in of the conclusion and all the process. So for me, it's quite important to have some, let's say, lessons learned regarding this dimension. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guy, and that's a highly relevant question also for us as FAO, being an intergovernmental organization. We of course want to move us to the next step of how do we support policymakers to understand these conclusions and to understand how to move this into action. So that's a perfect transition to move back to our conclusion from Marie and for her to clarify some of these issues. Marie.
Thank you very much to all of you for making all these comments on the Miro board. I would separate and try to summarize by saying 2 points. One is about the topics that are in the foresight processes and how they relate to agroecology. And so some of them say, yes, how can we take more into account questions like inequality? Isn't it possible to include all for the agroecology principles within one scenarios? How do we stress and make the link between qualitative and quantitative approach? I think these are very important topics. We will not answer for all of them, but we will try to be a bit more precise on that. My feeling is that, for example, if I take the question about all agroecology principles and avoid picking some of them. It's very difficult because, as we said, there are always trade-offs. Agroecology brings things positive, but there are always trade-offs. It is up to the agroecology people, and when these foresight communities and agroecology communities will work better together, I think these questions can be tackled. As far as changes we should make in the proposed guidance, I notice the fact that we should really separate messages for the agroecology and foresight community. I must admit we had tried to do that at the beginning, and then we decided to mix them more. But I think we will try, we hear your comment, and I think it's a very important one, and we will try to listen to that. As far as how to include more policymakers, that's something we try to stress very much in the report, but might be not enough in the presentations. And our recommendation is that really right from the beginning, policymakers are included in the foresight process. Very often policymakers are invited at the end of the foresight process, and they're not invited right from the beginning. And so when they are presented results, they do not own it. These results are just, they're given that, and then they have to say, okay, what should I do? And it is true that it's very difficult for them to do anything with the foresight processes. So we will stress that the importance of including policymakers earlier in the process, more in the guidance document. As far as what are the key implications, I will not go through everything, I'm just picking up some of them. As far as the key implications of these recommendations, I see that you all agree basically that more funding is necessary, rigor. And I think rigor is important, but I will also stress the importance of what we call intellectual indisciplines, because there's something we all have, what we call in French, the idée reçue, that we all think the same things and do not question them. And so this intellectual indiscipline kind of pushes us to question what is commonly said. And so I think that the rigor and intellectual disciplines are both really very important. Otherwise, we all get to the same results. I see that one of your, that's what's important for you, is to tailor the tools to the participants, and we agree with that. Some of you say that the business as usual scenario will be penalized in favor of agroecological futures. I would say that foresight is a political process. It's not a neutral process. We can create places where everybody has the capacity to speak in a protected way and to be listened by everyone. And that's why ethics of deliberation is very important. But it is not a neutral, it's a political process. And of course, when donors kind of favor these type of foresights with agroecology, they want to be in favor of agroecological future, but really they want to go further. What does it mean to have an agroecological future? And I think that's a very important process. I will stop there because the time is short, but we will keep all your comments and we will try to include them in the document. The document is also available on the Google Doc. So please do not hesitate to look at it, to write your comments, and all this will really help us in making a document that is not our document, but it is really your document because you've been able to make some comments. Thank you very much for coming, for so many of you to come in, and we really hope that, as Monica said and Anne-Sophie said, there will be greater linkages between the foresight and the agroecological community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie, for summarizing very rich discussions in the chat. And we will be sharing all of that with participants. And now I would love to give the floor for a few perspectives, candid perspectives, to Raoul Mille, who is the scientific counselor at the permanent representation of France to the UN here in Rome. And Raoul is knowledgeable about our topic. He has already put his teeth into this in the past and has been a supporter of our work. So Raoul, we'd love to hear a few words from you before we move on to our closing remarks. Raoul.
So thank you very much. The Anne-Sophie, well, the reality she wanted a French-German amateur to, so she asked me, and it's an honor to greet also my friends online, Marie, Fatima, Sylvain, who will conclude in some minutes, and to my German friends, Grüße, ich bin ein Hannoveraner. So, in fact, I can only warmly congratulate all the CIRAD experts, their partners, of course also GIZ and the FAO for the excellent cooperation and trust. Here are some informal remarks. We did clearly learn how foresight contributes to the transformation of the food systems. By reminding a basic scientific evidence, we do not know what the future will be, and in any case, it's not predefined. But we learned that by reflecting through foresight, we better understand the factors which allow us to go in a certain direction of an agroecology future. This is the rational side. We can create a vision, hopes, feeling. This is a sentiment, desire. But be careful. People are not basically interested in future. People do not read more than 3 pages. Scientists are not every time very good in designing future. And foresight is a highly dangerous activity. You can use it through Kung Fu or IPO. This is a choice. And foresight experts have to clarify, and reinvent. What I explain, I'm not objective. Since my childhood, I'm obsessed with long-term consequences of present actions. The sector which I had been chosen for work was forestry. You cannot destroy a tree, you cannot tell him to go 3 times quicker. He has its own rule. And I discovered foresight later, only in '94, in the library. It was the book 2100 from Thierry Gaudin, and I was absolutely fascinated by these 200 pages that probably no one read, but people do not read. They cut trees, but they don't read, of course. Later, I worked in Finland during 2 years, remote that time, and discovered the most future-oriented society in Europe, working on virtual reality, or maybe 20 years ago, information society, nanotechnology, but the word agroecology was never used. Later, 10 years later, so 2010, in Austria, I spent 2 years organizing talks on foresight with universities of Bodenkultur and 2 European workshops. So, what did I keep about this after having read your reports and listening? I repeat, people don't be fooled. People are not interested in the long-term future. You are, I am, but mostly they're interested in themselves and short-term. Second point, scientists do not have a sufficient imagination. It was a director of Bodenkultur University who noticed that the scientists who made foresight were sometimes not so good than just politicians, writers, poets. So sometimes put artists in your works. Clearly, we must better learn to analyze the long-term consequences of our current decision. And I would say also the document you work on is excellent, but it doesn't reflect exactly, but maybe it doesn't need to reflect the different écoles de pensée in foresight. Also, how to evaluate the foresight activity, study what is good, what is not good. The missing factors were touched by some of you. I would quote the externalities, like the true cost. FAO has spent a whole year working on the report. This is something which will be more and more present in the foresight activities. And values, also ethics, equity, it was said by Marie and by Oliver. And I didn't read so much the word resilience, risks, and even cows. So, last point, foresight studies, it was written, describe the complexity of systemic and dynamic relations between actors. But on the paper it's quite easy. Last week, I listened 2 hours explanation by Professor Bourguignon, he was a former economist of the World Bank. And during 2 hours, he's now 70 years old, he explained how difficult it is to understand the complexity of the actors of a society. And so we should not minimize this. A paradox, startups, we all know the startups die in the first 2, 3, 4 years. And foresight is very much on the long term. I'm just wondering if we shall invest inside the foresight study a bit about the 10 next years, because it's the most difficult period. So my conclusion really is, I believe we have to reinvent a bit foresight in order to integrate better the past and the future in our decision maker, in the present activities, because foresight is clearly not about the future. It's about the present. Some presents can create chaos in the future, disaster. Others can much more help to conduct a positive development. So I strongly believe that your work altogether will contribute to reinvent how to conceptualize foresight, of course, for the transformation of food systems, but more generally also for the implementation of Agenda 2030 and beyond. Bravo to all, and let this workshop have a little butterfly effect in the foresight community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raoul, for these provocative words. More food for thought, more things for us to address and focus on, for sure. We're now moving to our closing remarks, and we're very happy to have with us Sylvain Perret. He's a scientific director at CIRAD and the head of research department, environment and societies in Montpellier in France. He has over 35 years of experience in research and higher education in the countries of the global south across several disciplines: agronomy, hydrology, environmental sciences, economics, financial and management sciences. So Sylvain, I think, is well placed to have a holistic perspective on some of these issues that we have been discussing. Sylvain, very glad to have you today to give a few closing remarks. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm even gladder to be with you today and to have this opportunity to give you some final words on behalf of CIRAD. Well, it's been a great pleasure to contribute to this venture, to work with FAO and GIZ, and of course equally with our Indian and Senegalese partners in the project review of participatory foresight on agroecology worldwide, and the pilot foresight in India and Senegal based on the Agribiome model. I really wish to warmly thank GIZ for funding the work and FAO for trusting our capacity to do the job. I'll come back to that slightly later, but this commitment of donors and also policymakers, decision makers is really key to the process. On the occasion, allow me to also thank and congratulate our team, the CIRAD team, which is small but very active and committed on achieving these results. When it comes to multi-scalar transitions, be it on food systems or agroecology, for instance, foresight analysis prove crucial, and they are very important for us at CIRAD as instruments to sort of align and orientate our research now and in the future. We'll strive to carry on with the further developments, expertise, and growth on the domain of foresight, that's for sure. The work done on the pilot foresight demonstrates that we may address those systems transformation at two interacting levels, which I wish to highlight with you. First level is the way we do research, with collaborations, partnership, imagination, creativity, sheer openness, but yet with robust methodologies. This is very important element for us researchers, but I think it embarks all stakeholders involved in the research itself, including decision makers and major stakeholders. Second, very important element is the outputs we gain. They are mostly valuable resources to policymakers and these major stakeholders I mentioned, in the form of information, in the form of capturing what uncertainty really looks like. We always talk about uncertainty, but really foresight analysis allow us to at least remove the the wild branches and to look a bit closer right to into the eyes. What is this uncertainty that we always look about? And it's also about translating the picture of the future into opportunities, possibly way forwards, and ultimately planning support, real decision making and action by the right stakeholders. Of course, as I just read on the conversation on the side, this is the tricky part. How do we translate all those decisions into action and into decisions? But that's something that we also have to look together forward to it. The methods are diverse, but flexible enough to allow for addressing the stakes at territorial and at the global level and the different scales. That is very, very interesting and important. The work done also touched on what lies ahead with regards to the future of food systems. That is the transformation of extension and advisory systems. I think this is a very important dimension that we should not forget. The work performed with different partners and with the FAO has been presented during the International Science Day 2023, as well as other work done by INRAE, our sort of cousin organization. Lorenzo Bellu had the opportunity to comment and further disseminate the results and the conclusions. So with regard to the workshop itself, the comments we received from on the guidance document have been very, very helpful. Thanks for all who contributed onto that. Finally, with regards to prospects, agroecology is one of CIRAD's 6 priority fields. We collaborate already with FIO, with the TAPE project, with the 1CG system on the TPP, and yet one would say that there exists too few foresight approaches, analysis, and reporting onto such agroecological transition. That is what we can observe. And there are many reasons for such a gap, among which lack of communication, joint working, and mutual understanding between the two communities. So we have probably to forge together common assumptions, metrics, research questions that we could co-develop so that such joint work take place eventually. I sincerely hope that other donors, or possibly GIZ again, will launch new foresight processes which integrate fully the agroecological transition alongside with the whole food system transition. As a conclusion, I would quote Saint-Exupéry, who wrote that the future is not simply the present that has to be put in order. You don't have to predict it, you have to allow it to happen. That's another story. And in a more illustrated way, I would also quote Edgar Morin, who said that the faster the car and the more uncertain the road, it calls for more powerful headlights. And these headlights are what gives us the foresight approach. I thank you all for your contributions and interest. I sincerely hope that all this work has contributed something to building the linkages between foresight, agroecology community, and maybe larger on food system community. And it will be helpful in the future, but also right now in the present. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sylvain, for these inspiring final words. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. We were a large group and very nice to see so many of you from different walks of life. We look forward to hearing more from you, and we will disseminate the report, the draft report, and the conclusion from today's workshop. Please don't hesitate to reach out and continue contributing to this work. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day, and warm greetings from FAO. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us, Oliver.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
You.
Bye-bye.